I'm all for the parties talking to each other. Don't have a problem with that. I've never had a problem with that. But the fact is that the last series of votes shows very clearly that the Labour Party want a very soft Brexit. They want a customs union, or they want to go back to the people who've already given them one answer. Theresa May wants her withdrawal agreement. It's very difficult to see how there's going to be any compromise at all there. But crucially, the people voted to leave. And if we have a customs union or stay in the single market, we will be one leg in and one leg out. And we will have to accept their rules and their laws and restrictions on, and we have to abandon any restrictions on free movement and not actually have very much say in it either. So that would be the worst of all solutions. The British people voted to come out, and that is what we've got to do.
And Widdecombe, you've been extremely critical of Theresa May, as Piers says, describing her as the worst Prime Minister since Anthony Eden. Is there someone who you would think could come in at this point and rescue this situation and rescue, for the Brexiteers, Brexit?
I think that the crucial phrase that you've used there is "at this point." I mean, I'm not sure that when we're involved in the most serious international negotiations for 50 years and we've got a deadline looming, that at this point is the time to change generals. But I do think that she has made a terrible mess of it, and I'm not going to rehearse all the various stages that we've gone through at which so many different approaches could have been taken. But I think now that what we've got to concentrate on is, do the hard Brexiteers really want a customs union? If not, they'd better get behind that withdrawal agreement, because the one thing it does is take us on the path to leaving. Any other arrangement keeps us on the path to staying.
OK, Ben Bradshaw, let's bring you in here. You support a second referendum. I mean, do you not accept, somebody who was, you were a Labour minister, do you not accept that I voted Remain, but I accept that the result was what it was, and that if we fail as a country to implement the result of that referendum, we don't even try, that actually what we're doing is destroying democracy, because we haven't even tried. We don't know if it would have worked if we don't try it.
I wouldn't put it as strongly as that. I mean, I voted for Brexit twice this week in the parliamentary votes, but the problem has been, up until now, right at the last minute, Theresa May has refused to soften her red lines and work across Parliament. As soon as she lost her majority in that disastrous general election 2 years ago, it was obvious to anyone that she wasn't going to get
but here's
Brexit
the problem.
through.
Here's the problem. Parliament is 74% Remain voting, right? It doesn't reflect the way the referendum vote played out. And there's a real sense I'm getting from the Brexiteers that they feel a mounting sense of rage, that their will, their vote, is being ignored by a parliament that's full of people that voted the other way and wants to either renege on Brexit altogether or dilute it, as we're now seeing, to such a degree with customs unions and so on, that actually it ceases to be Brexit at all.
But, as I say, the overwhelming majority of MPs, including me, have voted for Brexit repeatedly in spite of our own preferences. And Anne Widdecombe's absolutely right. The reason that Brexit hasn't gone through is because of a small number of hardcore Tory hard Brexiteers and the DUP. And so they're the blockage in this. And as she says, if they were to come in behind Theresa May's deal now, it could go through. I don't think they will. I don't think there's any sign they're going to do that.
What do you think, when Theresa May sits down with Jeremy Corbyn, what will Jeremy Corbyn demand, do you think?
Well, I hope he will demand what is Labour policy, which is a permanent customs union, a close relationship with the single market. They're the only things that can resolve the Irish border issue.
This is where the politicians clash with the electorate, because, we showed a video earlier this week which shows politicians on all sides, actually, but a lot on Remain side, saying very clearly, if we vote for Brexit, we'll be out of the customs union and we'll be out of the single market. So when you start talking about the fact that actually we'll stay in a customs union and we'll stay in the single market, there will be people shouting at their television saying, that is not what I voted for.
That, Susanna, is exactly the problem, that when we had the referendum in 2016, Brexit was not clearly defined. And the cabinet, is divided.
It was clearly defined as being out of the customs union, and out of the single
No,
market.
not by all of the Brexiteers. I mean, some, Dominic Cummings famously said, we want a Norway. Some said we want a Switzerland. That's customs union, that's single market. The problem has been that the government and the cabinet itself, all the way through this process, has been divided. Theresa May lost her majority, and until now, the very last minute, she's refused to try to seek a consensus.
Do you think a second referendum
is
is now more likely because of what happened yesterday?
I do. I think it's going to be the only way to resolve this.
But why do you think it would resolve it? See, even if we get to the stage of that, God, I hope we don't, because I think it would be so mutinous for the country. But if we do get to a second referendum and simply ignore the result of the first one, why do you think that would resolve anything? If it came back, 54, 46 Remain this time, it's not going to resolve anything. The Brexiteers won't stop. They'll demand best of three. And what right would they not have to have another referendum if we've already ignored one already?
Well, 2 points on that. Firstly, we'd be voting on something real, either Theresa May's deal or a different real Brexit agreement with the European Union, rather than a kind of fantasy.
So why
Brexit.
would you have remaining in the EU on that ballot paper? Surely the correct democratic thing to do would be to have whatever Theresa May's deal washes up at, right, after all the shenanigans in Parliament, and no deal. They should be the two options. It shouldn't include Remain, because Remain lost.
I think that would be completely democratically unsustainable, given particularly that a majority of the
Why?
public
44% of the public in the latest polls prefer a no-deal option to Theresa May's.
But the majority of the public, A, want another referendum, and B, they want to remain in the European Union. To ignore 60% of the population would be an absolute
Well, you want to ignore
catastrophe for our
52% of the
democracy.
population. Let's bring in Anne Widdecombe. See, Anne, the trouble with all this is that I think the public are getting a real mounting sense of anger that Parliament is basically trying to force through something that the majority in the country voted against. They voted for something that is now not being pushed through in Parliament.
That will be so if we stay in the customs union or the single market. I remind you that on the Sunday immediately after the referendum, that was just 3 days later, the Chancellor of the Exchequer sat on the Andrew Marr programme and said very clearly, we are leaving the single market, we are leaving the customs union, because that was everybody's understanding at Brexit. We wanted to end free movement and we wanted to be free of their laws and rules and to trade with the rest of the world. That was everybody's understanding of Brexit. Now, you can't have that if you have the customs union and or the single market.
What does it do?
Norway
What does it do, Anne?
is not free.
Right, what does it do to our democracy and our democratic systems if, in the end, the way people in this country voted is ignored?
Well, I mean, I think voting could well become then a minority occupation. I mean, if people think that their vote is going to be completely just ignored. I mean, this was the biggest democratic exercise that we have had for decades. We had record numbers of people voting. We had people voting who don't normally vote. And if the answer to that is, well, we're just not going to do what you want to do because Parliament has a different opinion, then why bother to vote at all? I mean, that'll be the attitude.
I mean,
but
Ben,
a lot of
see,
Britons now, I think, have just lost the will to live.
I mean, Ben, here's the problem I have with this.
That was the best eye roll,
I
by the way.
have no doubt that the Remainers who are screaming loudest for second referendum, if it was the other way round and Remain had won and we stayed in the European Union and Nigel Farage and the others were battling away nearly 3 years later to overturn that result and demand another referendum and so on, the very same people screaming for a second referendum now would be screaming the complete opposite and saying it was an affront to democracy. Do you accept that?
Of course, this is about democracy and parliamentary argument. You asked in your first question to Anne Widdecombe for a solution. What is the solution to the gridlock that Parliament
Well, I would
is
say
in?
the purest definition of Brexit currently on the table has just been removed from the table, which is no deal. That actually, if you asked 100% of the people that voted leave, did you think when you voted leave, say you asked them the day after, do you imagine that voting leave means that we leave lock, stock and barrel the EU? I bet most of them, 95%, would say yes.
I'm not sure it has been taken off the table. I mean, Theresa May
Well,
has
she's
said,
trying to, right?
Well, she may be trying to, but unless we get a long extension, there's still a possibility that the cliff edge is going to be moved from next week to May the 22nd.
What do you think is going to happen? If you were putting on your little prediction hat, what do you think?
I mean, I hope that Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn can make progress. This is a process that should have started 2.5 years ago. I think Jeremy Corbyn needs to be very firm. He needs to make absolutely clear what our alternative Brexit is, but also that in the end it's going to have to receive the consent.
But Adam Widdecombe, if that happens, right, then Theresa May will have been seen to have caved to the most left-wing Labour leader in living memory, right? I think that will lead to utter mutiny in her own party, possibly the collapse of the Conservative Party. I don't see how, from this place we're in now, Theresa May wins in any way she goes.
I don't think it will just be a case of the most left-wing Labour Party. I think it will be far more a case of she will have abandoned Brexit if she actually does that. It's all very well to talk about a cliff edge. Excuse me. We've had 3 years to get to the cliff edge.
Yeah.
That ain't no cliff edge. And actually no deal, though it may be uncomfortable, will not be the big disaster that Project Fear is painting it as.
It's not actually...
And that at least is a Brexit.
Right, it's not actually no deal anyway. You go on to WTO deal. So it's not like there's no deal. There's no deal with the EU until we sit down around a table with them and negotiate whatever the trading arrangements will be. You know, I mean, look, we are where we are. I don't see how Theresa May can possibly give Jeremy Corbyn what he would need to justify supporting her.
I wonder whether,
which is the customs union and all the rest of it. I don't see how he can get that without her losing her party.
I wonder whether Jeremy Corbyn would he make a demand for a general election in those talks?
Well, he
because
can't...
that's what he wants most of all.
Yeah, and I think a general election may be the only way out of this, but I don't think he's in a position to make a demand for one because Parliament, under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, has to vote for one. 2/3 of MPs have to actually vote for one. So there are some obstacles to us getting to a general election, unfortunately.
Well, the Tories won't want to vote for a general election because if they do, they'd probably lose it.